Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Nancy DeVetter. I'm an attorney in Savannah, and my area of expertise is helping people clear their criminal records. So today we're going to talk about Georgia's new expungement law because it changed in January, and it's a very big deal because a lot of people are now going to be eligible for expungement where they weren't before. So that's exactly why we're doing this webinar, and I want to thank everyone for, I want to thank the Empowerment Center and Representative Gilliard for partnering with me to put on this event, and thank everyone who's here today. So let's get started. Like I said, my name is Nancy DeVetter. I've been clearing criminal records for 7 years. I've done more than anybody else in Chatham County. And I expect at least in South Georgia. So what I like to do is help people understand their legal rights, because a lot of people don't know what their options are with criminal records and whether or not they're eligible for expungement. So once people understand their situation, then I can talk to them about whether or not they're eligible to restrict or seal or correct their records. And if that's not an option, to explain what other legal rights they might have. So what we're going to cover today is kind of a little bit of the historical legal background here. We're going to cover how to get and read a GCIC, which is people's official criminal records. And then we're going to talk about Georgia law allowing expungements, some federal law, and what else people with criminal records can do. Please let me know if anyone has any questions while we go. I want to thank the Georgia Justice Project, who's taught me most of the things that I know, and also the Community Legal Services in Philadelphia, who's doing a lot of groundbreaking expungement work and helping to change the laws around the country. So who has a criminal record? I always like to start here because I want people to understand the scope of this issue. We're talking about 1 out of 3 Americans have a criminal record. 1 out of 2 adults in Georgia have a criminal record. A third of Georgians have been or are under probation or supervision, and half of the U.S. children have a parent with a record. So this is not a unique problem for anyone. In fact, the issue is that this affects so many people, and people think that someone with a criminal record is different than you or me, but they're really not. We're talking about almost half of the adults in Georgia have a criminal record. So if you don't have a criminal record, you certainly know someone who does. Of course, I could talk all day about the reasons why a lot of people have criminal record. We can talk about institutional racism. We talk about the increase in misdemeanor arrests. We arrest people for things that we didn't used to care about, like sleeping in a park or being in the wrong place or being around a fight. We can talk about the war on drugs, which has allowed a lot more people to be arrested for misdemeanor offenses and for felony offenses too. There's different legal theories about arresting people for smaller offenses. That's a broken windows theory. That was a policing theory championed in New York. Tough on crime practices. So either way, we have a lot of historical policies that have brought us here so that we have a large number of Georgians and Americans with a criminal record. More than any other country, we lock up people. Georgia is particularly bad. Georgia has the second highest incarceration rate in the country. We put people on probation longer than anyone. We put people on probation 2 to 3 times longer than any other state. Where I practice, Chatham County is particularly bad at sentencing people to long offenses. It's amazing to me how many people are serving 10 years for nonviolent offenses. So that is something that we have to deal with here, because most of our expungement options, you have to wait until you're off probation in order to expunge anything. So that can really make people have something on their record for longer than necessary. We are the second worst in the country for creating roadblocks for people with criminal records. Only Alaska is worse than us. We have the worst possible rating in employment opportunities for people with criminal records. And until this year, we couldn't really allow people to move past a criminal record because expungements were so limited. Let me see, did I miss one? All right, so here's the takeaways that I want people that are watching today to know, is that it's really impossible to totally delete a criminal record. So when people ask me what their options are, we don't have true expungements. I use the term expungement because this is the word that people know instead of record restriction, which is what we call it in Georgia. But what we do is we restrict the records and we seal the court records, but totally deleting the record is not possible under Georgia law. So you restrict the arrest record and then you seal the court record so nobody can see it. So it's important also to know the new law. And also misinformation is really common. I see a lot of criminal defense attorneys that have information about expungements on their websites, but a lot of it is not updated and incorrect. So the 6 ways to really deal with a criminal record: you can correct it, you can restrict and seal it, you can use retroactive first offender if you never used your first offender before, you can get a pardon. We're also going to talk about dealing with third-party reporters and also some other options under federal law in case you feel like you're being discriminated against because of your record. So when we talk about criminal records, we're talking about both your official GCIC, which is your official criminal record, your police reports, jail, prison records, court records, FBI records. It's really important to realize that there's a number of steps that you have to go through to hide your record or restrict it from public access. Some records are already restricted so that you can't find them. But there are, of course, everything's on the internet these days. That's something to think about. So to know what's on your criminal record, you have to get your GCIC report. This is your report from your local police department. GCIC stands for the Georgia Crime Information Center. On your GCIC report, the rest is divided into cycles. Each cycle usually has different sections. It has the arrest information, indictment information sometimes, the court case information, the sentence, and sometimes parole information. It's extremely common to have missing information. And usually some homework is required to see what actually happened in a case to see if someone is eligible for expungement. Okay, so what can you actually restrict from your record? Non-convictions are almost always able to be restricted and sealed. This includes both felony and misdemeanor charges. When we talk about non-convictions, we're talking about cases that were handled under the First Offender Act, which is technically a non-conviction. We'll talk a little bit more about first offender later. We're talking about where all charges were dismissed or null prosed. There is usually an incentive for people to have charges reduced or have charges not, or plead to one charge in the case and have others dismissed. But if that happens, every single charge stays on your record. So even if some of the charges were dismissed, but not all of them, they all stay on your record. Additional discharge, being no billed, minor possession, diversion courts, those are all restrictable from your record. Now that should automatically be restricted for arrests that happened after July of 2013, but some clerks don't do that, and you have to ask for restriction. But for pre-July 2013 arrests, you do need to fill out a form to ask those charges to be restricted, even though they were dismissed. And once you get your restriction approved, you can file a motion to seal the court record. And this is what the restriction form looks like. It's pretty simple. You only have to fill out the first page and send it to the arresting agency. And then the prosecutor's office and the police department take care of the rest. For expunging non-convictions, a lot of people have to determine whether it's worth it. Unfortunately, a lot of HR departments don't understand what it means if a case was null pros or something like that. But a lot of people are becoming more savvy about that, and they probably won't use, or they shouldn't use, a non-conviction against you. So people have to decide whether or not it's worth it. It takes a long time, and and the fees can add up. So this is a big change in the law, right? For misdemeanor convictions. Misdemeanor convictions can now be restricted and expunged under Georgia law. Previously, this was only available to people that were convicted before the age of 21. Now, starting in January, misdemeanors are available for everyone as long as it's been 4 years from your last conviction. The kicker for a lot of people is that you can only use it twice. So you have to choose carefully if you have multiple cases. For some of my clients that have multiple cases, especially marijuana misdemeanors, hopefully we will see in the future an option to expunge marijuana charges specifically. So I advise them not to use it there, and to use it on things like simple battery or shoplifting or theft charges. You can't use it for DUI or driving charges. You can't use it for theft, but shoplifting is okay. You can't use it for sex crimes or crimes against children. And you do have to file a motion in court in order to get this done. There are a number of excluded offenses. This first one I'm not very happy about because I see a lot of people who plead guilty to family violence, simple assault, or family violence battery because they need to just get rid of the case and move on with their life, even if they were the victim. So hopefully that law will be adjusted shortly. But this is a brief, a whole list of everything that is excluded that you can't use misdemeanor conviction of restriction for. Felony convictions are now also eligible for restriction, which is huge, a huge opportunity for a lot of people in Georgia. This started also in January of 2021. This allows restriction of pardoned felonies. So you have to go through the pardon process first, but then you can file a motion to expunge, to restrict and seal the felony offenses. Serious violent felonies are not eligible, as are sex crimes. But all other felonies are eligible. So this is huge for a lot of people, especially people that have drug felony offenses. So, like I just said, you have to get pardoned. So the statute, the expungement statute for felonies doesn't have the waiting period, but pardons do. Pardons require you to have 5 years from the end of your last sentence before you can apply for a pardon. But once it's been 5 years, you apply for a pardon. There's a long pardon form that you fill out. This is also the process you go through to get your gun rights back. So a pardon determination takes 6 to 9 months. It might take more. Even though I just had a client who we applied in August, she had her interview in October and was pardoned in December. So it just depends on the work of the pardon board to see who is approved. I believe the pardon board did about 500 approvals last year. So there's a few other ways you can restrict and seal from your record. You can file a petition or a motion for these particular rare incidents, dead docketed. Chatham State Court and some state courts like to use dead dockets, but you can expunge those after 12 months. You can get a felony dismissed. If a felony was dismissed and you pled to an unrelated misdemeanor, you can get all the felony restricted and sealed, but you have to file that within 4 years of arrest for some reason. So there are small options. Normally I get my clients GCIC and I go through to make sure that we know every single option for every single charge, because there is some minutia here. You are also eligible to correct your record if there are errors. There is a high error rate for GCIC, and you're allowed to correct it if anything is inaccurate or misleading. You simply gather the evidence showing that it's correct and send it off to the agency, and they are supposed to do the correction. So First Offender Act is a huge tool. This is Georgia's second chance law that results technically, or you plead to first offender, or you reach an agreement to get first offender. And a court can even give you first offender after you're found guilty by a jury. But the first offender results in a pending case that is a non-conviction that is automatically discharged. And in Chatham, they go ahead and seal the record once it's finished. This is only for people that are facing first-time offenses. You can use this for a misdemeanor, but most people use it for a felony. And again, once you are done with your sentence, it goes off your record and is a non-conviction. So you can actually tell employers that you haven't been convicted of a felony if you use your first offender. A huge tool that passed in 2015 is retroactive first offender. If you didn't get First Offender Act and you were eligible, sometimes courts didn't discuss First Offender Act option with people, and attorneys didn't. If that's the case for you and you have an old felony and you should have gotten first offender for it, you can now go back and ask for it. Now, this is something that I recommend you have an attorney for, because you have to consult with the prosecutor in that for that case or in that county to get approval to even file for retroactive first offender. But this is a good way to get rid of a felony conviction. And this is a lot faster than a pardon. So we always look at this option for clients first. So it's common to see that, that there's issues here in the implementation of this law. A lot of clerks don't know this law. A lot of attorneys don't know this law. So these are common issues that I see. I see that post July 2013 arrests are still on the record. Normally we can just call the clerk and they can fix that. Missing and correct information, we have the right to correct that. I see a lot that First Offender Act cases are not discharged. Some people go to non-reporting probation and the probation office doesn't actually go through the paperwork to finish the first offender. But normally you can contact the probation office and get that done. I want to talk briefly about unofficial criminal records. These are records that are typically the kind of records that employer and landlords pull. These are not GCIC reports. These are reports like similar to your credit report. And like your credit report, these reports are covered by the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which is a law that gives you rights and protections from someone pulling your credit. For example, you have the right to know if someone checks your background, you have to give them written consent. And you have the right to know if your background is the reason for denial of employment. I see that a lot of employers don't do this, even though they should, because they don't know that this is the law. You should be notified if you are denied a job because of a background check. Big national companies like Kroger and Publix and Walmart, they do this, but and some landlords do it too, but everyone should be doing this if the background is the reason for the denial. We also have a high error rates in these background checks. So it's very important to make sure that the credit reporting agencies know that you've been expunged. And if there's missing information, you can dispute it under the same law too. The Civil Rights Act is one of the last laws I'll talk about. This is a federal law that provides protection for people with records and prohibits discrimination by private companies. And this law prohibits employers from having a policy that says we don't hire anyone with a criminal record. If you see an employer who has said, for example, we don't hire anyone with a criminal record, please let me know, because I would love to sue them. That is most likely a violation of the law. It's okay for employers to have a policy that's related to the work that they do, right? So trucking companies can say, I'm not hiring anybody with a DUI, or daycare can say, I'm not going to hire someone with a child endangerment charge. That makes sense. But for a lot of employment positions, your old misdemeanor marijuana is not going to be relevant and shouldn't be used against you. And if it is, you might have a claim under this law. I'm just going to talk about the other laws. There are literally 2,000 plus other laws that apply to people with criminal records, from trying to work in a credit union or getting your commercial license, getting your mortgage license. I represented someone who was denied his limo driver's license because of a First Offender Act. The good thing is that you usually have legal rights if someone is unfairly or improperly applying this against you for a case that's been expunged, for example. But it's important to know about this before you pursue a license or a degree in a certain area. It's important to know if there are other legal limitations out there that might apply to you. License issues are also very common. We have 20 plus statutes that can result in people getting their license revoked or suspension, even if it's not a driving offense. Most people are familiar with child support, keeping your license, but this can also apply to drug convictions and failures to appear. You can use your license. If you have a license, what I tell people is to get their DDS suspension report. That's the Department of Driver Services, which will outline exactly what you need to do in order to get your license back. For people that are receiving public benefits, there's some misconceptions out there. So I just wanted to lay those out there, that you are eligible to receive food stamps unless you essentially have an outstanding warrant. We lifted the ban on drug felons from receiving food stamps in July of 2016. You can receive some benefits while you're incarcerated, A big misconception that I hear is that you can't get student loans anymore if you have a conviction, and that's not true. The law says that if you're convicted of a drug offense while you're receiving student loan, so if you were, selling drugs out of your dorm, or arrested while you were in school, then yes, you can be barred from 1 to 2 years to a lifetime ban, depending on the severity of the charge. But normally, you are still eligible for student loans and grants, even if you have a criminal conviction. Voting with a record, I want everyone to know that you are eligible to vote in Georgia as long as you are off paper. You have to register, but as soon as you are off paper, and for a felony charge specifically, so if you were under first offender, or you are serving for on paper for a misdemeanor conviction, if you're on probation, you can still vote. So please vote. I hope everyone does that and is registered to vote. So housing has similar rights to employment. The housing policies have to make sense. And military services also have limitations for people with criminal records. You can't enlist with a felony conviction for most people. So here are my practical tips for dealing with a criminal record. To know your record, get a copy of your GCIC and know what's on it. Obviously expunge anything you can. Number 2 is to be honest with employers. I've had multiple clients lose their jobs, but not because of their criminal record, because they lied to their employer about what was on their criminal record, or conveniently forgot. There's really not much I can do with that. Take responsibility. Most people have a story related to their criminal record. I was with the bad crowd. I was in an abusive relationship. I was young and made mistakes. But no matter what the situation is, take responsibility for what happened, and of course be honest. I help clients prepare a statement about the history that they can share with employers, so that employers know up front what's on their record, instead of just checking the box that says I have a record, to explain exactly why they should hire you. Show both your skills and put a statement about your conviction if you can't expunge it. Please reach out if you have any other questions. I know we all know people with criminal records. Please let them make sure that they know that the options have changed as January 1. So there's a lot more things that people can do. And I mean, this can literally change the lives of millions of Georgians. So please spread the word. And I hope we can work together soon.